Hello, this is Territory of Glasnost. We are Danila Galperovich and Natalia Baltyanskaya, and our guest is Chairman of Subcommittee of the Human Rights of European Parliament, Heidi Hautala. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. And my first question to you is, how do you think? What's the size of the Glasnost territory in our country?
It's very limited, and looking today at the Triumfalnaya Square, it's even physically very limited because the Russian authorities and the Moscow city has all of a sudden come up with this fantastic idea to build an underground parking lot in Triumfalnaya Square. And I must say that in any European city, this kind of process would take years because it would need a public debate, a very long public debate, but here everything seems to happen in one night, and it's indeed a very limited territory of Glasnost.
If we speak about oppositional rally itself, what is your impression? And what is your impression about the actions of law enforcement structures, how it was? Because we have an impression that it was deliberately violent.
It was really sad to see this disproportionate amount of security presence in the square, and the intimidation of people ahead of the event. I am admiring people, 1,000 people or so, who really came to this event, even if they were intimidated, they were threatened with violence, direct police violence, from the highest level.
And by the way, it was the morning when I could read in the news that police promised that they will not make any difference between the foreigners and Russians, between the people from European Parliament.
Well, you see, I'm of course for equal treatment, and I believe that the Russian citizens deserve the same rights as all other European citizens, including we from the European Parliament. So yes, all for equal rights, but it should mean indeed that nobody is arrested, nobody's beaten, nobody's dragged from here. Or
everybody knows that European Parliament is aware, as you said. And when somebody says very angry words about the situation in Russia, it seems to me that everything will be continued in any way. What shall you do? What can we wait for? Because it seems to me we cannot do anything ourselves.
Europe should be very straightforward and not be intimidated by the Russian authorities. I've seen recently some positive things. For instance, there was a summit in Rostov-on-Don.
EU-Russia summit. Yeah.
Yes. And I must say, maybe I'm an optimist, but I do see that the European leaders are not only speaking about strategic partnership, but they are also pointing out that such a partnership has to be really based on common values, on rule of law, human rights. And what I saw in Rostov-on-Don, I wasn't there, of course, myself, was quite encouraging, and I have a reason to believe that the activism of the European Parliament has had some impact, because of course the European leaders must also listen to the only directly elected body of the European Union, which is the European Parliament.
It seems to me that there is only one method of struggle, economical. Because when we know about the European banks that try to stop visiting of those people who are guilty in the death of Mr. Magnitsky, I understand that it will work, really work. And what about human rights? Can I dream about economical struggle with this story in Russia?
I think the Magnitsky case shows that the European banks can show some ethical behavior. And I know people like Robert Amsterdam, who has worked in the defense team of lawyers of Khodorkovsky, and he's always pointing out that the United States and the European Union should have some legislation which means that investment coming from a country which is not clean in terms of corruption, which doesn't have a functioning rule of law, should go under very specific scrutiny. And of course then it's very sad to see that the European member states and governments are just flirting with the Russian authorities when they have a possibility to make lucrative deals on gas pipelines and oil. So I would say that in some extent your Prime Minister, Mr. Putin, is right when he says that the European Union is like a swarm of birds that is not united, but it's really disintegrated, and he's of course very much playing with this. But now we are in an interesting situation because the European Union has been committed to a more united foreign policy, and this is what we are trying to say in the European Parliament, is that yes, indeed, it's time to get united and not to make such solo performances from Germany, from France, and so on. And in the subcommittee, we make a very strong statement, and we have convinced the other institutions that human rights must be integrated into all aspects of foreign policy. So
we know that you visited Khodorkovsky-Lebedev trial. What is your impression? What is your main picture which you saw, which probably printed on your mind?
Can I just say that I feel very fortunate to have visited the court just today. Maybe it wasn't the only remarkable day at all, but what we saw is a brave witness coming to the booth in handcuffs, guided and guarded by a police officer. Mr. Pereversin, straight coming from the prison colony where he has been convicted for a long prison sentence.
He got 11 years.
He got 11 years, and he was giving evidence that the prosecutor had put a lot of pressure on him to witness against Khodorkovsky and Lebedev, and as a deal, he would get a reduced sentence. You should have seen when the prosecutor jumped up in the court and said that this is not possible. This must be interrupted. But we all who from the European Parliament delegation, we were full of admiration towards Mr. Pereversin, that he, at the cost of his own convenience and his own interest, he did give this evidence. And I think this evidence must be investigated in full, because if it is true, as we have a reason to believe, it's really a scandal that the prosecutor could put such pressure on a witness in a court system.
There was a mother of 2 children, Svetlana Bakhmina, who was asked to tell something bad about Khodorkovsky and Lebedev, and she didn't. There was Mr. Alexanyan, who is the very sick person, and he was asked to tell something about Khodorkovsky and Lebedev, and he didn't. How do you think? What is it? Why they spend their life, their motherhood, their health for this?
This is a politically motivated case, and obviously those in power, Mr. Putin and his friends, just do everything to keep Khodorkovsky out of the game. The elections are again approaching, and probably the only way to keep him in prison was the second case, which is completely looks fabricated, and seeing with my own eyes today with my colleagues that indeed there's a strong reason to believe that there's this kind of, let's say, completely unacceptable pressure towards people who should be free to speak out in a court. I think it's really a scandal. So the only thing that really would now make sense is that both Khodorkovsky and Lebedev are immediately released, to made free.
So you don't believe to the words of Russian Prime Minister Putin, who just said in a recent interview that he got to know about second process, second trial just recently, and he didn't know about anything about that, and he think that okay, it's strange, but it should be investigated, so on. So you don't believe it?
You know, I think your Prime Minister made a serious mistake by talking to a relatively serious newspaper, which has a good readership, which is followed and read by educated people. And I think it's nobody can believe, of course, that it's true what he says.
Let's speak about another very high person, about the president, because exactly this guy, in the beginning of his term, told about the fight with judicial neglectance, with the judicial anarchy and all of these things.
Legal nihilism.
Legal nihilism, exactly. So, do you think it's just a make-up for this power, for these authorities, or Medvedev has something serious behind it?
I hoped, like many others, when he started to talk like that, that it would lead into some action. But I think there's two things that one can assume: that, well, it's words meant to be heard by people in the West who take decisions on cooperation with Russia for the best of Russia's interests. But another, I think, a bit more serious thing is that it seems that if his words were to mean something, he doesn't seem to have influence and power from the presidential position to implement what he wants. And that indeed shows some serious concern about this serious lack of functioning institutions in Russia. Even the best president cannot change the system if there are no functioning political institutions. You know, a freely elected parliament, Duma, Senate, whatever, and then a government which is accountable to the parliament, and then a president that has clearly defined powers, and then, of course, an independent judiciary.
How do you think there is now an idea in the Russian society? Somebody wants to break the union between Putin and Medvedev, and somebody thinks that if they will be parted, president will be real president, and so on, so on. What do you think about it?
I think this is some kind of intellectual entertainment, and I know that even in Europe at many tables it's a popular entertainment to speak about Putin or Medvedev, Putin and Medvedev, which one will take over from whom. But I think this is just intellectual entertainment. I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in getting a situation where elections can be free and fair, where the opposition has a chance. Now the opposition has no chance. And of course then those in power can do whatever they like.
Thank you very much indeed. It was Heidi Hautala from European Parliament, the chairman of Subcommittee for Human Rights, and questions were from Natalia Baltyanska from Echo of Moscow and Daniela Gulperovich from Radio Liberty. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you.